position which you want to get in a decade. And I believe in what Newton said. And Newton said, we see further by standing on the shoulders of giants. So if you can, please find yourself a mentor. And it takes time and it takes effort, but worth it.
That's the leverage, isn't it? Thank you so much, Diaz. I want to ask the same question to Tiffany, but maybe with a bit more focus on, one of the questions from the audience, about portfolio management, moving into portfolio management with wealth management area. So with 5 years of accounting and financial reporting experience. So with that, could you wrap up your wonderful career advice, please, Tiffany?
Thank you. Yes, so as I said before, that this move is totally doable and almost natural. I'd say one thing I add, if you want to pursue the CFA program alongside, which is something I would definitely recommend to acquire more of the financial market aspect of it, aside from accounting knowledge. Definitely take into account that it's a 2 to 3 year process. So it's not just you need to mentally prepare for 6 months, because the different levels build upon each other. So you should not let too much time pass between the different exams. So that's for the CFA program of itself. And in terms of networking, regarding that specific move, I would definitely network. I guess, for me, when I think back about every job opportunity I had, there was a phase of networking, even if then, of course, there was, the standard processes of recruitment. But I think when you think around networking, don't fall into the trap of just doing it when you need it, when you need to change jobs, for example. It's really a long-term, continuous effort. And it's almost, you need to network twice as hard when you're in your job and comfortable in it. And networking then it becomes about, learning more about the industry, learning more about being curious about other people's functions and roles, and about their thoughts on trends in the financial industry, for example. And that builds relationship over time. And if at some point you say, okay, I need to make a move, that's when you can network with a more precise aim.
Yeah, networking is like a compounding interest, isn't it? Yeah. So how about you, Patricia? Is there a career advice that you want to give early professionals or students, please?
Okay, so I completely agree with my companies that said about networking. I would say like your network is completely priceless, but as they have said, it's a long-term job. So maintaining your network. I mean, because nobody likes this person that just collects like contacts for future leverage. It has to be like it has to be natural. And I will add that at least in Spain here, and I know that this is true also in other countries, I would say like most of the job positions are not listed in LinkedIn or other sites like this. They're filled by like word of mouth. And so actually I landed my new role in Banco Sabadell because because of my network, because it's not just because of knowing someone, it's because a lot of people in the industry has to know you, and they have to know that you actually work well. It's not just because you are someone's daughter or someone's son. It's you have to be someone reliable, and having a network of people that gets to know how you work on a daily basis, and that you're a reliable worker. It helps with that, and that helped with my role. And regarding the CFA charter journey, I will just add to what my colleague said, that you have to treat it almost like a second job, you have to commit like to just timeline and to start like quite early. I also started like I would say 6 months before exams, and the 1 month before the exam, like it was like a very focused month, and just maintain a very consistent study routine.
Thank you so much. So, so we are coming very close to the end, but we are not going to leave without asking Man his last maybe career advice for students or early career professionals, and maybe you could add what are the things that you think have made a big difference in your career. Just, of course, in addition to CFA knowledge itself. I mean, we touched upon lots of things, but Man, I'm sure you have a lot to say. Yeah, so let's ask Man, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you very much. I think as a career advice, I strongly urge everyone these days to have a mindset of how to excel and have a strong edge against others. Now, in today's world, it's becoming very competitive, and you have very smart people graduating every year and excelling in their career. So you really need to keep in mind of things that would help you have a stronger edge than others. CFA is definitely one of them by having the strong technical skills. Networking as well is a strong asset that not many people have. But also other things like, for example, being well aware of a new trend that is going on, like AI these days, etc. So just having the mindset of always thinking of what I could have a stronger edge against others will definitely help shape your behavior, your day-to-day behavior. And back to your question, Johili, on what other skills that has been valuable in my career. I strongly think that soft skills like presentations, negotiations, and teamwork have been very valuable. Sometimes, no matter how smart a person is, if such skills are not there, it will be very hard to excel in a career. In many situations, especially as you grow more senior in your career, technical skills become less of an importance while soft skills prevail. Networking prevails, and how you present things and how you manage internally, how you manage your boss, your team. These type of soft skills usually prevail as someone becomes more senior. In my case, it helped me a lot grow faster than I would have imagined. So I strongly urge to focus both on technical but also soft skills.
Thank you so much. You just mentioned soft skill, and we have been talking a lot about putting extra effort, due diligence, continue learning, and grabbing global opportunities, and through this wonderful journey together. And in whatever the phase we are in Korea, I think there is a lot to learn, and that extra effort will probably get us somewhere really nice. So on this note, I really like to thank the audience and our 4 speakers, Man, Diaz, Tiffan, Patricia. All the best for your career, and hope to see you again. And we do have some polls just being sent to you. So if you could respond to the polls, it would be lovely. Thank you so much, and have a lovely day.
Thank you very much.
If you're a full-time student looking to build a solid foundation in finance and gain a deeper understanding of the investment industry, we've got some exciting news for you. CFA Institute is now offering an exclusive student rate for the Investment Foundation Certificate, reduced from $350 to just $79. This is the perfect opportunity for students who are curious about finance and investments and considering a future in the investment industry. By earning this certificate, you'll take a first step towards level 1 of the CFA program. You'll enhance your resume with a globally recognized qualification, and you'll gain valuable industry knowledge that will set you apart. The certificate is also ideal for earlier students and students who want to master the language of finance. Start your journey in finance today and find out more about this exclusive student offer on our website.
It's kind of like a global passport for me to the industry from different countries because it's global recognition. And secondly, it's about like this knowledge I learned through these 3 exams and also the experience I gained from the industry.
I feel the CFA Charter will help me in my career by giving me a much broader idea of the investment landscape. I'm focused in private equity, but with the CFA Charter I've gained knowledge of listed markets, which I didn't have before.
It's a certification that you're serious about finance. It means that you really know how to study really hard and you really have a really good knowledge about finance.
CFA opens, so many more topics for discussion with my colleagues and people that I meet on a day-to-day basis. But also, new topics that I got introduced over the years, like data, science, AI, machine learning. All these little bits and pieces they were introduced over periods. I think that kept me always on toes and, striving to new areas.
This has somewhat boosted my career in terms of I feel very confident in terms of learning about finance, and I know what is the demand of the industry. Being a CFA charter holder is definitely going to give me a nudge in my career.
I think the best thing you can do is to start volunteering early, like meeting everybody, getting involved in events.
You have to always be learning, be a student of the market, know regulation, know how companies, people make money.
To consider seriously the charter, I think it has a curriculum that is it's very broad, but also besides the technical competencies, you can surround yourself with people that think likewise, where you can learn a lot from.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar as part of the CFA Institute's Careers Week, which is on private markets, the next frontier, hiring trends and careers. Before we get started, I think we have a few poll questions for you to answer, and just a quick overview of the housekeeping items. So we have participants both on Zoom and LinkedIn Live, and we're asking for Zoom participants to keep their audio muted throughout the session and submit any questions they may have throughout the session into the Q&A box, which we hope to answer towards the end of the session. For LinkedIn Live participants, likewise, question can be submitted via the chat, and at the end of the session, we'll take a look at those Q&A. So you will shortly see some polling questions on your screen, and you will be promoted to submit your answers. Please do so. And if you're on LinkedIn, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, you can submit your answers via chat. So I think you should be seeing the poll questions shortly. So whilst you're answering the poll questions, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Osbjørn Zundu. I'm a Senior Director at the CFA Institute in the Education Division. I work on content, and in the last 2 years since I've joined the CFA Institute, I have been working in particular on content on private markets. We have a whole stack of certificates on private markets, from the foundational level PMAKE, the Private Markets and Alternative Investment Certificate, to the upcoming APEC, which is the Advanced Private Equity Certificate, with PEC, the Intermediate Level Private Equity Certificate, in between. So I've been, and it's been an absolute pleasure to work on those products. As our honored guest today, we have the Rustam Arucha. And I'm really pleased to introduce Rustam. He is the Group Director at Mercury Orville, working out of their London office. And there, Rustam leads their global work in areas like leadership advisory, executive search, and leadership assessment. He has years of experience helping companies around the world become better and stronger by attracting, developing, and retaining top talent. Some of the sectors he has worked in are financial services, fintech, technology, and private equity. Always bringing fresh ideas and practical solutions. Also, outside of his day job, Rustam is very involved with Premier, the Professional Risk Managers International Association. He chairs the London chapter and also leads their group on sustainability and climate risk. And I think on top of all of this, he still finds some time as a keen cricket fan to coach a youth cricket team, Colts Cricket, supporting them and helping develop their skills and bring more diversity into the sport. So welcome, Rustam.
Thank you so much for having me, Azmi, and thank you for the CFA Institute for putting this series of events together. Just having a look at the poll questions, I would say close to 50% are in higher education, i.e. university or MBA. So it's a great opportunity to just share some of the skills we've learned over the years. But it's an absolute pleasure being here. So thank you for having me.
So it's a great pleasure. So yeah, as you said, looking at the poll results, the great majority are currently in education, whether that's undergraduate or postgraduate education. And then sort of a close second is a group of people working in an unrelated field, but interested in transitioning to private markets, which is a fairly common way in as well. And then we have about a fifth of the participants, a little over a fifth, working in a related field. In terms of the biggest challenge in getting into private markets, the most common answer by a big margin was lack of relevant experience. And I think we could probably list that in as a challenge in getting into many sectors with not enough networking opportunities, a distant second. And then there was a clear winner in terms of which area of private markets is of most interest. That was private equity, followed by venture capital, infrastructure and real assets, and then private credit was dead last, even though that's probably one of the biggest growth areas these days. So that was interesting to see as well. So Rustam, we will start out by some quick fire questions. If you remember, the rules for these quick fire questions were you answer as yes or no. And if you can't answer as yes or no, you can then say maybe, followed by 2 sentences max. So first question, are private markets a force for good?
Yes, definitely. Strong yes.
Okay. Do people in private markets work long hours?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have to have work experience at an investment bank or an asset manager to get into private markets?
No.
Do you have to have an MBA or a degree from a top university like Ivy League or Oxbridge to get into private markets?
No.
And do you have to have studied finance and accounting?
No.
Right. So thanks for those questions, and I think that will perhaps be a relief to some of our viewers, and for some others thinking, well, maybe I should have studied anthropology, which I like better than accounting at university. Let's move on to our main questions. And this is perhaps even a philosophical one. It's about how you would define private markets, recognizing that there isn't really a single definition that everybody agrees on. So you have years of experience in this, Rustam. How would you define private markets?
Absolutely. And that's a really good question, because I think as you're starting your career, if I'm addressing this towards the top 40% who answered during the poll, if you look at private markets, the definition is very simple. Private markets is basically investing capital in privately owned companies, companies that are not publicly traded. So it's in the name. And if you look within private markets, there are perhaps 5 type of sectors you're looking at. You're looking at private equity, which I think people are very familiar with. You have private debt, which pretty much is providing debt finance to privately owned companies. Then you have infrastructure finance. It's providing finance for large infrastructure projects. These could be ports, these could be roads, it could be anything, but large infrastructure finance. Under that, as a subsector, or you could have it completely independent, you could have real estate as well. It's investing in real estate projects, real estate funds through REITs. And of course, last but not the least, is the startup world of VCs. So these would be the 5 categories really within the private markets sector. And if you look at private markets as a shadow banking industry, it's really interesting, because if you look at the data, and if you just had to see the video that was playing before this session started, where I think there was a McKinsey report into how many trillions has been invested into private markets, 70% of funding in the US happens through private financing, private markets. Europe, it's about 50%. Asia is similar, about 50 to 60%. So slowly but surely, it's actually overtaking traditional financial services as a financial instrument and industry.
Yeah, and those are some amazing statistics, aren't they? And the trends are the growth trends are they're facing tailwinds, which is also great.
Absolutely.
So as somebody who has experience, years of experience in leadership search and executive search and talent development, what are you observing as current hiring trends in private markets, and how have they evolved compared to the recent past?
Yeah, interesting question. Again, in regards to hiring trends, I think you can break it down into different levels as well. If you're going at the senior end, there's a lot of executive turnover. So there's a high demand for CEOs go-to-market roles like revenue generation or marketing roles, demand gen, and CFOs as well. And within private markets, a lot of compensation for senior executives is actually tied into successful exits. So there's high turnover because there's a lot of overhang where the exits haven't happened the way they had hoped for. So there's extremely high turnover when it comes to senior people within the industry. There's also high demand for them. Compensation trends, there's a strong demand for people who have strong analytical skills along with operational effectiveness in their skill sets. So that's highly in demand. Specialized roles in demand, technology, data analytics, analytical roles are in high demand. Also, strategic leadership positions highly in demand, right? You're looking at CFOs, chief operating officers. How can you really improve the operational efficiency of an organization and take it to 3x or 5x within a period of 3 to 5 years? So these are some of the hiring trends that you're seeing within private markets.
That's very interesting. So based on this sort of high turnover and increasing demand, if we sort of move over to relatively more sort of mid-career and junior roles, how would you say candidates can best position themselves to enter and advance in the private market sector?
Great question. I think if you're looking at middle-level roles, and again, I'm going to go back to one of the questions you asked earlier in the fire chat side, right? I think you asked, do you need experience working in an investment bank or an asset manager to get into private markets? If you look at private markets, the way they would invest in companies, so if you and I set up a fund tomorrow, Azmi, we would be very specific in terms of what sectors we're looking at. So let's just take life sciences, for example, right? If you and I set up a fund wanting to invest in companies purely in life sciences, where are you going to get the best analysts, people from that life sciences industries? So really trying to see how you can promote yourself to be that subject matter expert in a specialized area. And then looking at which private market companies specialize in that area, tracking them, following them, and really just keeping abreast in terms of who are the big movers and shakers within that sector where you have the skill sets. So you have the technical skill sets, but how can you have the extra analytical skill sets and the soft skills, right? In terms of really being able to see how you can make those operational efficiencies to grow. And you need to have a growth mindset. That's the number one piece about private markets is that growth mindset, right? Most of their investments are either going from series A, B, C, D, or going into going through an IPO and pushing that company into the public in public markets. But it's really understanding how you can marry those skill sets, those technical skill sets, along with the commercial acumen.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So the example that you gave was about life sciences. So if you are somebody experienced in life sciences, perhaps you worked as a research scientist and now you're looking at a career change, that would be one potential avenue for you. Or perhaps you are trained as a civil engineer, or you worked as a project manager on projects like that, then infrastructure might be a route for you rather than what we think of as a stereotypical route of a finance degree followed by 2 years of work experience and an MBA, which I'm sure is also common.
Absolutely, absolutely. And working within private markets, a lot of them, as you're graduating, you have the title of operating partners, right? And every large PE firm would have their little formula where they would bring these operating partners in and really train them how they can turn a company around. So you acquire a company for 1x or X, and this is their revenue at the moment. And it's your job as an operating partner to work with the management team in that company that you've acquired to help them really achieve that growth and fast track that growth, so you can get that return on investment for your investors who are invested in the fund, and how you can go ahead and sell that company to the next level. And that's how you get the exit.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Rustam. And in terms of hiring practices, what are you observing as far as the role of diversity of experiences and backgrounds, and also inclusion playing in the private market sector right now in terms of their hiring practices?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think we've seen some of the political announcements from various governments where perhaps they are retracting some of those DEI initiatives. But if you look at private equity as an industry, the number one thing, one of the reasons why they're so successful is agility, right? They're very, very agile in what they do. And one of the reasons why they do that is because they want to bring in the best person for the role. And one of the ways they do achieve that is also by having diverse teams, because you can't discount the competitive advantage you would have by having diversity of thought in the boardroom, in your management team. So PE firms have always prioritized more inclusive practices, and they've really brought together diverse teams, not just of diversity in terms of gender or sexual orientation, but also diversity of experience, right? How do you bring together that commercial acumen along with the technical expertise, which I shared earlier? So private markets have done that very well. And that's also one of the reasons why they attract a lot of diverse talent. So I believe last week there was an article in the FT where Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, said, why is it that all our interns who are interning with us are actually going and getting jobs in private equity rather than traditional Wall Street banks? The reason for that is it's a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more inclusive. What I mean by inclusive is not just from a diversity perspective, but just inclusive from a thought, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds. Private markets are very, very welcoming to those who can really make an impact. It's on merit, but it's a very inclusive environment. So as a firm, Curie Urval, we always promote I and D rather than D and I, because if you don't have an inclusive leader, you don't have an inclusive environment, you're not going to be able to have diverse teams. So PE do that really well. Private markets do that really well. And it's also just, it instills creativity when you have a diverse group of people coming together. You have diverse ideas, diverse thoughts. You represent your customer group. So that's why I said they're very dynamic, they're very agile, they're very innovative. And one of the reasons why they do that is because inclusion has always been part of their DNA, the sector, that is.
And that's great. And as you said, that's what helps keep them agile and dynamic with this diversity thoughts. I mean, having worked in a startup many years ago myself, I have seen firsthand how this diversity can lead to diversity of opinions and people sort of balancing each other out or bringing different talents, which can really help drive value. So thanks for that. In terms of technological advancements, are they having an impact in hiring and career development in private markets, Rustam?
Yes. If you break this down into two sides, one pure technology, and given that this is a careers talk, more in terms of access to people. So if you take the top bit, which is technology, automation and AI is playing a big part, right? In the past, if you're running portfolio analytics, for example, that would be done manually through Excel, through formulas, it's keying in numbers. That's a lot faster now, right? So if you look at AI and automation, that's really been a tool that PE have really adopted. Also, it's not regulated. So perhaps like financial services adopting new technology where regulation perhaps is not hindering innovation and growth, and it's being done responsibly. That's where I think the PE, VC, and private markets world have had that competitive advantage because of the agility that they can basically adopt. Also, digital recruitment tools have come in. So if you go back and look at the survey that we had of the composition of delegates on this webinar, when you're applying for roles, you're going to see a lot of the times you might need to send in a 1-minute video of yourself. There's not going to be a person assessing that video. It's all going to be done through automation, AI, and a lot of digital tools. So these AI-powered tools will really help assess candidates. You have advanced analytics in the recruitment process itself. That's why including keywords on your CV, really tailoring your CV, your resume, and your covering letter for every role that you apply would really give you that competitive advantage. I know LinkedIn has that easy one-click apply thing. You're not ordering anything off Amazon, so avoid that one-click option. Really tailor your application, because that's really going to stand you out amongst everybody else out there, right? So that's how technology is really helping the recruitment side. The other bit is, personally, from an L&D perspective, there are so many online tools out there that can really help improve your skills and set you apart from the 49 other people who are trying to apply for the same role, right? How do you really set yourself apart? And I believe the CFA Institute also has online modules as well. So it's really refreshing to see a very well-established, long-serving traditional institution is also moving along with the times and really helping people be relevant. So it's really good to see that from the CFA Institute. The other piece is technology is also helping and has created the gig economy, right? You have a lot of contractors who companies can access now through Upwork or Fiverr. So technology has been an enabler for that. The other piece is enhanced data analytics. People are using that for really seeing what kind of skills are required for the future. So technology is also playing a part in terms of how companies make hiring decisions for the skills that they as an organization need for the future.
Very interesting stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think especially about using technology efficiently, whether it's your job applications or to hone your skills, that really brings some very important points on that. A few months ago, I was going through some old stuff at my parents' house, and I found my own CFA study materials from when I took my CFA. I should say probably before many of our viewers were even born. And shuffling through the pages, it just struck me so hard that how quickly things that you learn go stale and have to be replaced with new, more up-to-date knowledge. Apart from some truths of statistics and time value of money, everything's all changed. And the importance of keeping your skills and knowledge up to date is very important. And of course, as you said, CFA is taking great strides in that regard. So you talked about how professionals can stay competitive and relevant. In terms of, and this was one of the poll questions, and private equity won out by a big margin, followed by venture capital and so on. In your opinion, what are currently the most promising career paths within private markets, and what growth opportunities do they offer?
So if you're looking at career paths, again, I'll break it down by sector, right? I'll put down PE and venture capital together. Right. At the end of the day, if you're looking at PE and venture capital, they really want analytical roles, right? People who can run a data analytics and roles where you can really improve operational efficiencies. I think I mentioned that earlier during this session, but really marrying those two bits, financial planning, analysis, risk management, and operational roles. Those are key within the PE world, but also this is at the portfolio level, but also you got to remember the companies that PE invest in. There are also so many opportunities within those companies. So it's an entire universe out there. If you're looking at private debt, those are basically professionals who work in private debt, would be providing debt financing to PE-backed companies or PE firms. Over there would be credit skills, again, analytical skills, investment skills. These would be roles over there. If you're looking at infrastructure and real estate, you have project finance roles over there, funding roles within fundraising. Those will be roles within infrastructure and real estate. And you also have fundraising and investor relation roles in the entire ecosystem, whether that's PE, debt financing, infrastructure, real estate, or VC. Investor relation roles are key because being able to have those relationships with investors when things are going right is great, but also having those soft skills when your investments are not going that well and making sure that those investors are still backing you because they believe in you, they believe in the process, and things go up, things go down, right? There's always a risk when you invest. So investor relation roles are key and high in demand. And of course, roles within operational improvement because organizations want growth, and that can only be achieved through operational efficiencies and improvements in how organizations operate.
That's great. And earlier on, when we had a quick chat before this webinar, which I found incredibly invaluable, by the way. I mean, you know, having, I mean, this is for the audience. Having a chat with Rustam is one of the probably best things that you can do for your career. And you mentioned the importance of building a network, Rustam. One of the most important ways of doing this is perhaps by LinkedIn these days. What advice would you give to job seekers?
I think that's a great question, especially job seekers, people starting out of their careers. I would say there are a couple of ways you can approach this. LinkedIn, definitely one. But if actually you go before LinkedIn, before you get into LinkedIn, how do you build out to that, right? You got to create a network. How do you create a network? You can use your college professors, you can use visiting lecturers to really try and get a mentor. People like helping people, right? So try and get a mentor who can really help you and navigate and help you grow because they'll give you access to their network. The second piece about LinkedIn is how can you use LinkedIn? LinkedIn is the fastest growing social media platform out there. It's got more new users than any other social media platform out there. How can you use LinkedIn? The number one key piece about LinkedIn to remember is it's a professional social media platform. So people are going to measure you and judge you depending on your LinkedIn profile. A prospective new employer is going to look at your LinkedIn profile as the first port of call. So have a professional photograph on LinkedIn. Avoid distracting backgrounds. So try and have a clear background and a professional photo. You don't need to take that professionally in the studio, but just something that's not from a holiday, right? The other piece is use LinkedIn. If you've done an internship, mention that there. If you've had a visiting lecturer come in, post about that on LinkedIn, tag them. It increases your presence on LinkedIn and gets you noticed more. It shows engagement with the community. Join LinkedIn groups. Try and contribute to LinkedIn groups with meaningful contributions and comments. Follow key influential people on LinkedIn who can really help advance your career. The other piece on LinkedIn also is there's a lot of noise on LinkedIn, and some people may agree with this, some people may not agree with this, but keep LinkedIn posts and comments professional. What I mean by that is keep it work related, keep it related to the topic of the industry that you serve in or the industry you want to work in. Don't put personal stories on LinkedIn, right? Also celebrate wins on LinkedIn. For example, if you got a recommendation from a colleague or a professor, mention that on LinkedIn. The other thing is, as you're starting out your career, it's very tempting to click the connect button. My recommendation, if you're doing that, LinkedIn always gives you the option to add a note. Always add a note why you want to connect with that person, right? So if you've had a visiting lecturer come in from a PE fund or something talking to you, in your note, put a short note. Hi, John, or hi, Marie. Thank you so much for your contribution. Really welcome your commentary. In the spirit of growing my network, I would welcome the opportunity to connect with you. Thank you. That will get you more connections as you're starting your career with senior people, rather than just clicking connect and sending. It's on Instagram or TikTok where you're just following people. So I would really give them a reason to want to engage and connect with you. And again, as I said, people like helping people. That's human nature, right? Give them a reason to, and it will really help you lay the foundation of having a very good and strong LinkedIn network.
Absolutely. And this is, yeah, I mean, I think this is just like gold dust in terms of, especially people who are just starting out in their careers. These are really important steps to take. So looking at the time, I think we'll move on to some audience questions. Actually, I recognize this name. I think this is one of my former students from the University of Liverpool. Hi, Sharpay. So a question for the speakers: have recent economic and geopolitical events impacted hiring trends in private markets, and what changes do you foresee in the near future?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think if we've been transparent over the year, I think a lot of the noise coming out from the US at the moment, you got to remember private markets will, purely from a risk appetite point of view, given what's happening, your large, traditional, highly regulated financial services institutions may not be
in the recent past. And we now have pathways in the CFA exam, where at level 3, your examination is based specifically on the pathway that you have chosen. And private markets is indeed one of those pathways. So I would say if you choose the private markets pathway of the CFA, that makes the skills and knowledge that you gain very relevant to that industry. And on top of that, we also have professional skills modules, the PSMs now, as part of the CFA program. So these include things like financial modeling, using Excel, portfolio construction, and so on. And these are very much in-demand skills for private markets. And on top of that, I'm not sure before we have a whole stack of private markets qualifications apart from the CFA, whether that's the foundational level PMAKE, or the intermediate level PEC, the private equity certificate, or the upcoming advanced private equity certificate. So I would say these are very relevant. And there are a couple of other questions about certificates. And perhaps I should turn the microphone over to you, Rustam. What do you see as the importance of these professional qualifications and seeing evidence of these in somebody's CV, especially in early to mid-career. What would that signal to you as an executive search professional?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think I alluded to this earlier during the webinar that I think having that professional qualification will definitely help, because given that CFA has really tailored their offering towards private markets and the high demand for analytical roles is key, and especially if you have a certification and you're starting your career off. At the end of the day, a prospective employer will carry out their recruitment, their due diligence, whatever they need to do. But one of the ways someone can really prove that someone can do a job is by actually getting them to do the job for 12 months. But that's not an option. So one of the ways you can really demonstrate is showing that you have the analytical skills, you've done a professional certification, which is going to help them. It's taking away the uncertainty from a prospective employer that actually the person I'm bringing in has the skills, has the understanding of what we need in order to get that return on equity for our investors. So actually, I would say having something which is tailored for the private market sector, a certification would really hold you in good stead. The other thing is having that certification along with an internship is what's really going to set you apart, right? You can do an MBA, but I would say an MBA is more designed for someone who's in their middle management, who's had a few working years under their belt. That'll serve you much better. But if you've just graduated and you're starting out earlier, an internship early on during university days, and certainly a certification of that CFA or any other institution. But again, the good thing is the CFA is a trusted global brand. So yeah, by all means, having a certification would definitely help you and set you apart from the competition.
Indeed. And yeah, I mean, I can personally attest to that as somebody who has studied in one country and has made a career for himself in another. Having the CFA has certainly helped my career immensely, especially in those earlier years when nobody knows about the university that you went to, and the subject that you studied, in my case German literature, is not quite relevant perhaps to a job in financial services, and that can really help set you apart, especially as you said, if it's combined with an internship or some work experience. So I think we have time for just one more audience question, and this is aimed at you. And we've talked about opportunities related to AI. Well, this one's about risks related to AI, and it says, this is from Carmen, which roles within private markets do you think are at highest risk for disruption or replacement by AI?
Which roles are at disruption? I would say previously where you needed 5 or 6 analysts to physically carry out portfolio analytics, those large manual input roles will be the ones which will be impacted, right? If you're really looking at growing your career and want to get to the next level, it's really understanding if you want to be successful pre-acquisition, previously when money was cheap, and I say money was cheap, interest rates were low, access to financing was a lot easier. Companies would be happy to invest in, PE firms would be happy to invest in 10 or 12 companies, and they would be happy for 8 of them to fail. And if 2 succeeded, that was good for them. Now that's come down to 5. They're happy for 5 companies to fail. So there's a more of a emphasis on growth, and that's why I talked about operational efficiencies. So having that ability to really analyze the financials of a business, understand the business model, and have a quick turnaround time of really assessing if that's worth investing in is what really PE firms want. So yeah, I would say AI will impact, but PE firms don't have teams of 1,000 analysts like large banks would. So they've always been agile. And I think I mentioned this earlier. Agility is really what makes PE firms be dynamic and effective.
Very interesting. And yeah, I mean, I do remember some wise words from one of our own AI experts at the CFA Institute, who always says, your job is never going to be replaced by AI, at least not yet, but your job may be replaced by somebody who can efficiently harness the power of AI. And perhaps that's all the more reason to skill up in that area as well. So Rustam, thank you very much for taking time out of what must be a very, very busy schedule for you for attending this webinar. And I would like to ask you one final question. So similar to our quick-fire questions at the beginning, if you had just one key piece of advice for somebody wanting to break into or level up in private markets today, what would it be?
I think if I break it down into advice, more from a career perspective, right, the way I would answer that is actually, depending where you are in your education cycle, if you're just starting out, I would treat your 20s to really know where you want your career to be in. What I mean by is, very early on, try and understand what sector you want to specialize in, because you can't be a generalist. You have to be a specialist, and industry expertise, being that subject matter expert in an industry would really help you. So in your 20s, try and identify that, get that job, join the firm you really want to grow in. Late 20s, 30s is where you're really building your career to know what stakes in the ground you need to put in so you can get up to that management level, right? 40s is when you're really building your career to get into that senior management role, and really build your wealth. 50s is when probably some of the most expensive times for you as a person, because you'll have high education fees for your kids, but that's also when you're building your retirement pot. So try and break your career out into chunks of 7 to 10 years and try and see what you want to achieve. Because by year 3, if you're not on track to try and achieve what you want to get at the end of that decade, you need to make these changes earlier on. Otherwise, you will get left behind. And the way the world is changing, there's a chat about future skills. What are the future skills required? So always keep yourself up to date and relevant for yourself and also for your employer and your future employer.
It's great words of advice. Rustam, thank you very much again for joining, and for our audience, thank you very much. And the upcoming seminar is on sustainability, hosted by my colleague Sonia Gandhi. So I hope to see you all there. Thanks again.
My name is Sonia Gandhi. I'm a senior director in the education division at CFA Institute. And at the outset, my apologies for the tech issues that we've been facing with the sound of the videos. So very sorry about that. Today's session is scheduled for 45 minutes, including Q&A. This session will be live streamed on both Zoom and LinkedIn Live. For Zoom participants, you'll be muted throughout the session. Questions can be submitted via the Q&A box. For LinkedIn Live participants, questions can be submitted via the chat. We'll be running a few polling questions to keep the session engaging, and you will be promoted to submit your answers. And this session will be recorded and shared with the registrants once available. Today's topic is Advancing Sustainability, a deep dive into global practices. I'm delighted to be joined here today by Hardik Shah, Head Sustainable Investment at DSP Mutual Fund. Hardik, a very warm welcome. Hardik is a passionate sustainability leader, and he's been working at the intersection of finance and sustainability for many years, including as ESG practice lead at GMO. Today, I'll be speaking to Hardik about a wide range of issues pertaining to sustainability. Why sustainability matters in finance? What are the big challenges in sustainable finance today? We'll talk about global trends. Hardik will share his experience in integrating sustainability in investing decision-making, how it can impact financial valuations and expected returns. We will discuss the skills and knowledge that young professionals need to develop, and much, much more. So thank you for joining us for this wide-ranging discussion today. You will also have time to ask Hardik some burning questions you might be grappling with. So I encourage you to post your questions in the platform of your choice, LinkedIn Live or Zoom Q&A, depending on which platform you are using. We'll keep the session dynamic. It will be peppered with polls. You will have opportunities to express your point of view through these polling questions during the course of my conversation with Hardik. So stay alert, stay engaged, and enjoy the session. Let's get started with a fun question. And this is for all participants, so please use the Q&A function in Zoom to put in your answers. If I were to ask you to define sustainability in one word, in just one word, what word would you choose? Let's see some responses come in, so we get some idea about how this group thinks about sustainability. Define sustainability in one word. What word would you use? We are seeing some answers come in. Value. Let's see some more come in. Long-lasting. Excellent. Adaptability. Necessity. I like all of these. Future. I absolutely agree. Sustainability is the present and the future. Revolving. Healthy. Future. Risk management. Absolutely agree. Yes. It's a good risk management tool to think about these things. So those are some of the interesting responses. Thank you to everyone who's put them in the chat. Continuity and some other responses I continue to see. Moving on, Hardik, in my role as sustainability lead at the Institute, I work with a lot of sustainability professionals like yourself. And I see that there is a real acknowledgement of the fact that sustainability is not a passing fad, it's here to stay. Why do
we are having an adverse effect on the global climate? We are facing erratic weather patterns like floods, storms, wildfires in some parts of the world. And these are getting not only more frequent year on year, but also more severe. And this is not just a problem for one or two countries here and there. This is happening across the developed and emerging markets. If you think of wildfires in the last few years in California or Canada, flash floods in various parts of the Indian subcontinent. So this is something that is impacting everybody. It's not just impacting a few. Now the question would be like, this is basically an impact on the society or the environment, right? Either there is human lives lost, or maybe there is some kind of flora and fauna loss. So why should I be concerned as a financial analyst? Or why should I be concerned as a banker? So let's kind of take these use cases. So for example, if you're an equity analyst, why does climate change matter to you? It does matter because physical impacts of climate change, like the ones that I described before, are not only disrupting normal business operations. So imagine your factory of a company that you hold in your portfolio is in a flood-prone zone. Because of the floods, they might have to shut operations for a few months or a few weeks. They might have asset quality impact in terms of maybe losses because some assets are damaged and they'll have to replace it. And eventually all this will have an impact on the company's ability to grow and generate profits and eventually its valuations. That's kind of why an equity analyst or a portfolio manager should be concerned about this. What about a banker, right? Why should banks be concerned about this? Banks, more often than not, would provide project finance for certain projects. If these projects are no longer kind of expected to last its useful life, how does bank recover its principal and interest, right? That is both credit and default risk are at play here. For an insurance company, so let's take another use case in the financial services sector. Let's say a property and casualty insurer. Why it matters to them? Because they will have, because of these kind of more frequent, for the lack of a better word, let's say climate catastrophes, they will see more and more frequent kind of claims, right? And this is going to impact their profitability. So there might be an instance where they might say just certain regions or certain areas are just not insurable. And this is not fantasy. This is already happening in parts of the world where they're not able to insure houses, let's say in California, because the wildfire risk is almost certain. So they play with probability, right? So they can't really take on that risk of small premium for maybe a claim that is going to come in 2 to 5 years. So there are different use cases, but this is why I think it matters to different people in the finance industry. Sonia.
No, absolutely. And thank you for setting the scene so nicely for us. Like physical manifestations are all around us of climate change, and we are all experiencing the impact of that. When we talk about sustainability in finance, we often hear terms like net zero commitments, green bonds, transition finance. Can you provide an overview of some of these key themes for everyone to acquire a basic understanding and a common vocabulary?
Sure. I think one thing that we should definitely work on in this field as sustainability professionals is to limit the number of jargons that we use. I think that's something that we are guilty of. And to be honest, even after being 15 years in this space, there's a new jargon coming up every month pretty much, which I don't know of. So I'll try my best to kind of simplify some of these things. So I think let's start with net zero. Now, this is something that you might hear both in the context of companies having net zero targets, but also countries having net zero target. What does this mean? When you think about carbon emissions, right, or fossil fuel or greenhouse gas emissions broadly, when you say it's net zero means let's say if you're emitting 100 units of carbon, right, 100 tons of carbon to the atmosphere, by doing activities which are broadly known as sequestration, or basically activities that suck carbon out of the atmosphere, you're actually pulling out 100 at the same time. So then what happens is net contribution to the incremental contribution to the atmosphere of carbon emissions is zero. So that is what we mean by net zero. A lot of people get confused by saying, does it mean that we cannot emit anything? That's not the case. That's going to be very, very difficult to have zero carbon emissions, but whatever small amount you can emit, you could basically sequester it back. It could be via planting trees, or there are also some pilot technologies right now which can actually take carbon off the atmosphere. So that is net zero. Now, why does this matter? There is, back in 2015 in December, there was something called as the Paris Climate Agreement, which was signed where countries kind of came together and said, we want to limit global warming, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer compared to pre-industrial era, or definitely well below 2 degrees Celsius. And for doing so, and you might have seen this in some of the introductory videos as well, we need to reduce our carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. So that's kind of the target that the world collectively has taken. You would find companies and countries, both some of them having more aggressive targets. I would say some have 2030, 2040 kind of net zero targets. And then on the emerging market side, you would see countries like India, for example, having a 2070 net zero target. But irrespective of which year they were trying to hit the target, what is very clear is everybody's on the decarbonization path. So that's kind of the net zero thing. Now let's go on to the next one. I think green bonds is what you said, Sonia. So let me touch upon that. Now, taking that decarbonization theme forward, if you want to remove carbons or reduce our carbon emissions, What we have to do, one of the ways to do this is invest more money in green and projects. So let's say renewable energy generation is one such example. That is where green bonds come in. Green bonds are basically bonds where use of proceeds are earmarked for green projects. Now, the next question is what is defined as green? And the definition would vary from region to region, in some cases countries to countries as well. But largely what I've seen in the market being more widely followed is a couple of, let's say, large frameworks, right? So one is something called as Green Bond Principles. This is followed by the ICMA, or International Capital Markets Association. And there's also something called as Climate Bonds Initiative. These guys have defined certain activities and products to be green versus not. And you've seen a lot of corporates kind of align their use of proceeds to these frameworks to basically tell to the investor that, yes, I'm going to use this funds raised for A, B, and C projects. So that's essentially what green bonds do, is basically divert a particular pool of capital towards green projects. Lastly, coming to transition finance. Now, one thing is very clear, that we cannot solve the global warming and climate problems simply by focusing on green projects, or let's say putting up more and more green projects. Yes, that is part of the solution, but the bigger part would come in from basically transitioning existing industries. So think of energy sector, utilities, steel, cement, transitioning them to a more lower carbon trajectory. So today, these industries are some of the most carbon intensive industries out there. If you just put in more and more renewable energy, that's not going to offset, that's not big enough to offset the emissions coming in here. And hence, this is where transition finance comes in, is basically providing finance for either capital expenditures or operational expenditures to such sectors that I mentioned earlier, for enabling them to kind of decarbonize or go on the decarbonization journey much more faster, right? So it could be in terms of adopting new technology. It could be retrofitting some of their factories to make sure that they are more carbon efficient or energy efficient, and so on and so forth. But that is what transition finance is used for. And in the last couple of years, more specifically, you've seen clearly the global narrative shift from we just need to focus on clean and green to we also need to focus a lot more on transition. So that's where things stand. Back to you, Sonia.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hardik. And before we move to our first poll, just one last question, if you could quickly answer that. If our participants want to anchor their thinking around some numbers regarding sustainable finance growth, how should they think about it? What numbers would you say they should think about?
Sure. So we were talking about green bonds earlier. So I think if you think about the growth in this particular kind of asset class, back in 2020, so not too far back, 4 or 5 years back, the annual kind of issuances of green bond around the world were about $250 billion US. In 2024, this was a little over $700 billion US. So the market is growing at an exponential pace, and that is something which is expected to kind of keep going on, because we need not billions, but actually trillions of dollars being invested in fighting climate change. That's this one problem alone. So this is a trend, something to kind of keep in mind. If you think about is the responsible investment or sustainable investment trend only done by niche specific asset managers or investors, or is it more broad? I think one statistic that I'd like to put out here is there is an association basically called as the Principles for Responsible Investment, or the PRI. This is the global body that's promoting responsible investment. Both asset owners and asset managers like ourselves are signatories to this particular initiative, and we're kind of promoting the idea not only within our firms but also within the industry. If you look at the signatories for PRI back in 2020, so again, not going back 10-15 years, just 5 years back, there were about 3,000 signatories across the globe. Today, there are about 5,500. So again, exponential growth, and approximately combined, these 5,500 signatories manage around $128 trillion US in assets. So again, this is not something that's done by a select few. This has become much more mainstream, I would say, in the recent years or so. So that's something to keep in mind, that again, this is not a short-term fad, if that is something that a lot of you might have in mind. But again, I would say these are a couple of key statistics I wanted to provide.
No, perfect, brilliant. And that takes us nicely to our first poll. If we can run the first poll, please. If I were to ask you which aspect of sustainability interests you the most, what would be your response? This is for all participants, so please, whether it's transition finance, Is it integration in investment decision making? Do you think about circular economy? Or do you think, according to you, regulatory landscape is most important? Or for many, it could be monitoring your own carbon footprint. So just to get some idea, how does this group think about the aspects of sustainability that interest them the most? Lots of responses coming in. Please keep it coming for a few more seconds. We'll leave it open for a few more seconds. So far, the maximum I can see is coming for integration in investment decision making, which is very interesting. Lots of people for transition finance as well. I think the concept of circular economy is quite important to people. Okay, we are going to end the poll here and see the results. So maximum people, and Hardik, you should feel very happy about it. Most people feel integration in investment decision-making is the aspect most important to them, followed by transition finance. Then it's monitoring one's own carbon footprint, as well as circular economy. And then regulatory landscape comes the last. So thank you everyone for participating. This just gives us a good idea of how you are thinking about these issues. Moving on. Hardik, you've spent a long time in the industry advocating for and integrating sustainability in investment decision-making, which is something I saw most of our participants are most interested in. So this question follows very nicely after this poll, though I didn't know these will be the poll results when I was writing down the questions. Can you share some experiences of, either advocating for or integrating sustainability in investment decision-making?
Sure. I think when I started off in this field, I'll be honest, it was painful. It was a bit frustrating as well. It was not always like, yeah, let's just do it. You had to kind of fight your battles, whether internally or externally. So take kind of my response with that background in mind. So let's think about, let's say, a decade ago, when you go and tell an investor, okay, you should be incorporating material, environmental, social, governance issues or factors into your investment decisions. More often than not, the pushback came in saying, yeah, I would like to do it, but there is not enough data. The companies are not disclosing much. How do I compare across my portfolios? Or something like, my job is to kind of make returns. That's what clients are paying me for. Why should I focus on ESG or sustainability? Because I feel I might leave returns at the table. So these were some of the common kind of let's say pushbacks or challenges. Now fast forward to today, the discussion has moved on from why sustainability or integration or why ESG to how, right? So now I think in most markets across the world, including emerging markets, you're not seeing investors question, why should I do this? I think it's more of how can I best kind of do this to fit into my investment process. So I think one of the tips I would give to new professionals getting into this space is try to come in as a collaborator rather than a disruptor. So think of a situation where, let's say I've joined an asset manager as an ESG expert, or I go in and kind of tell the fund manager, hey, you've been managing this fund for 20 years, that's fine. But starting tomorrow, you can't buy this, can't buy that, this is not allowed, that is not allowed. Can you guess what the reaction would be, right? It's going to be like, don't teach me to do my job. I've been doing this for 2 decades. Like, why do you want me to change? But if you flip this and say, okay, this is the reason why a particular thing could be a risk. This is how it could play out and in what time horizon. And hence, I think we should be more kind of aware and cautious of investing in this company. Then the chances of kind of, let's say, embracing this is much higher, because when you link everything from sustainability to financial impact, and I understand it's not going to be easy. For some issues, it's much more straightforward. From others, it's not. But if you kind of go with that mindset, it's going to be much more easier to, I would say, convince the other party to not only listen to you, but also act upon some of these things. When I kind of first started in the asset management space doing ESG, what was essentially happening was there was a mix of, like, some portfolio managers were like, this seems interesting, let's explore it. The others were fence sitters, or someone like, don't bother me, right? So there's, even today, when you will see all these varieties of kind of investment team opinions. So I think if you kind of work with them, understand their investment process, and then come up with a solution that helps them enhance their investment process rather than basically curtail it in some form, I think the chances of success are much more higher.
I think that's very sensible advice. I would totally agree with that. And is there any particular example? You don't need to take any names, but one particular case study which you could talk about, which would help our participants to understand how exactly practitioners think about these issues?
Sure, I can give an example. This was from back in 2019. We were evaluating investing in a materials company from Mexico. I can't take the name, but essentially what we were trying to do is figure out what are the key environmental and social risks for this company, right? And one of the things we identified was their carbon emissions were very high. So now that information alone probably doesn't move the needle. Why should we be worried? Because this company had not only operations in Mexico, but also had factories in parts of developed markets in Europe and the US, where carbon regulations were either already in place or were likely to come in the near future. So then the question in our minds was, what if this company has to pay, let's say, a carbon tax of $10, $15 per ton of carbon emitted? How is that going to impact its profitability? So in absence of factoring this in, I think if I remember the numbers well, we were looking at an internal rate of return of about 10%, which is decent, not something to kind of brag about, but worth considering in terms of investment. When we put in a carbon tax of only $10, $10 per ton, which is not very high. I think in Europe, it's much more higher, and it's eventually played out to be much more higher than that. Straight away, the profitability or the expected returns went from like 10% to a negative 1 or 2%. So straight away, the company was like not attractive at all, even with such a small carbon impact. So what this case essentially gave us a sense of was that, okay, even with a minor regulatory change, this business is not going to be profitable unless they do something different, right? So we had back then decided not to invest because we didn't see the company kind of have a strategy to decarbonize, given that they were in an energy intensive business. And that kind of analysis helped us kind of firm our decision. In absence of that, we would have thought 10%, yeah, that's great, let's take a small position in our fund. And eventually when the carbon regulations came in, we would have probably lost out because of that. So that's one example I can share with the attendees.
No, that's a great example. And Hardik, I'm seeing a lot of questions coming for you in the Q&A. So I'll ask you a few more questions, and then I want to spend time on answering what participants want to hear. Some of them will get answered while, in our conversation itself. But moving on, what would you say are the biggest challenges in sustainable finance today that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think like before I answer the challenges, let me give you a little bit more of background context, right? So in the late 2010s and early 2020s, there was enthusiasm, I think I would say over enthusiasm about sustainability and ESG, where anybody and everybody wanted to kind of look good, feel good, came out and said, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do net zero by 2050. A lot of people pivoted their careers. So I would say we kind of, as an industry, we kind of created a false sense of, yes, we are getting things done. And that kind of came crashing a little bit in 2023 onwards, right? So right now the industry is in a consolidation phase is what I would say, which is not at all, in my opinion, it's not bad, because I think you need this kind of level setting to then have a firm base and then go kind of to the next level, right? So I think we had these, I'll say, headline focused attempts rather than impact focused attempts, and that I think now have been for various reasons called out. So when you talk about challenges from going forward, I think one is to basically focus less on portfolio impact, but focus more on real world impact. And that is something that we need to do more of. Just because I remove a coal mining company from my portfolio will look clean and green, but does it mean the world has less carbon emissions? Probably not, because the company is still in operation. So I would rather stay invested, engage with the management, and push them towards the right kind of decarbonization trajectory versus just decarbonizing my portfolio. That is something that needs to be solved for. And I'll be kind of living in a fantasy world if I say there are no regulatory challenges. I think what's happening with the current US government, I think, is definitely a I would say something to keep in mind. It's already having real world impact as well. So I think from a regulations perspective, you'll see maybe a year or two of, let's say, slowing down. But I think one thing I want to touch upon, and maybe this might be part of some of the Q&A as well, but very briefly, what will happen with the current administration in the US is, I think the intent is not, I mean, what you see in the media a lot of times is sometimes misleading. The intent is not like President Trump is against, say, solar or wind or something like that. I think he's more saying that, okay, if you are blindly excluding fossil fuels or blindly excluding certain companies, that's not what I want, because I want to secure the large companies in the United States. What he will definitely favor, he's a business person at heart, right? So what my feeling is, if there is a business sense of doing something, he will basically continue supporting that. Doesn't matter whether it's renewable or something else. So just don't get too swayed with the headlines. I think this kind of, it's more a passing phase in my opinion. Just to take one concrete example, right? So the cost of generating renewable energy in the US is about $35 per megawatt hour. And again, the same cost when you are putting up a new coal-based power plant is about $65. So even if you are not a tree hugger, you're not an environmentalist, the economics are very clear that it makes sense to have incremental addition in solar versus, or renewable energy broadly versus coal. So this is something that nobody can debate or argue on. And these are like some examples where you will see things progressing probably a little slower than anticipated, but still progressing in the right direction.
Okay. So I'm starting to pick up questions from Q&A and weaving them in my questions. So I'm seeing this come up. I mean, many of the participants today either are already working in or are aspiring for a successful career in this field. So I think it'll be good for us to spend some time talking about the skills and knowledge that young professionals need to develop. And we could discuss this across different sectors, like maybe real economy, jobs, financial sector. So I think this will be very helpful for our participants to hear from you. What are the skills that they need to develop to make a successful career in this field?
Sure, Sonia. So I think one thing we need to understand that, so when I started in this space in 2010, it was a specialized field. So you had domain expert, sector expert, sustainability expert, whatever you call it. Today, sustainability, I think, is part and parcel of most roles. So it doesn't matter whether you are a financial analyst or your day job has a ESG title or not, or a sustainability title or not. I think you will have to deal with different degrees of sustainability data. I think since we are talking about largely for an audience that's interested to work in the financial services space, I can say in terms of different roles within the financial services space, I would say asset management we've talked about, right? If you're an equity or a bond analyst, while doing valuations, while doing your discounted cash flow analysis, you should be factoring in certain material E, S, and G risk. So your ability to not just identify that, okay, climate change. So I go back to my example of the Mexican materials company. Not just identifying that climate change is going to impact them, but how much and when. Like that's the skill set you need to do, and it's not rocket science, to be honest, right? I think it's just another risk factor or another opportunity factor that you're looking at while assessing a business, and that's pretty much it. If you're someone working in a bank, there are two different kind of areas where I feel there'll be kind of need for sustainability skill set. One is on the credit risk assessment side, because climate risk, for example, in most major developed markets is now mandated that banks should have a climate stress testing done, right? So how much is going to be the impact of climate change to your portfolio, so your loan book and so on and so forth. So credit risk management and stress testing is one area. And then we already talked about green bonds and broadly sustainability bonds, where fundraising aspect or issuance of such bonds, a lot of financial institutions, including banks, are doing that. So that's another area where you could play a role of maybe I'm just basically trying to raise funds to deploy, but it will be more focused on green projects or renewable projects and so on. Outside of the financial services industry, I would probably point out two major areas where there'll be a lot of jobs and skill sets required. One is on consulting side, so including the Big Four and many other consultancies. You're seeing a lot of demand from corporates on corporate sustainability reporting and assurance. So your ability to kind of understand certain sustainability reporting frameworks and then help companies implement them and report on them will be a bigger kind of job pool that is already in place. You could also get into technical consulting if you have an engineering background and want to kind of get into, let's say, helping companies reduce emissions on the ground. So not just report things, but also go to the factories, suggest changes, and so on and so forth. That's another area in the consulting space that could be of interest. And lastly, but certainly not the least, there is the corporate sustainability teams. I think depending on the size of the companies, typically larger for larger market cap or larger footprint companies, but there's roles within the corporate sustainability team where they're not only kind of working internally with different departments to implement sustainability strategy and initiatives, but also talking to investors, talking to other stakeholders, and trying to get the holistic view embedded into your sustainability strategy. So these are some of the areas I can point out, Sonia.
Okay, now that's very helpful. And I think I would now like to focus on the key skills for, core finance, sustainability related core finance roles, and some of the learning pathways that are to help our participants acquire some of those skills. So are there any particular skills here? And then I can speak to some of the offerings that they can look at.
Sure, Sonia. So I think I did touch upon some of the skills required. So again, taking the example of asset management, I think the ability to quantify material, environmental, and social risks. So if someone says, okay, the health and safety, let's take a social example for instance, the health and safety metrics for a company are deteriorating, meaning they're having more accidents and injuries in their factories year on year. What does that mean? Then you kind of say, okay, what's been the compensation the company has to give to the staff for basically their workplace injuries? Is that rising? How much of that? What is the proportion of profits that this penalty or this kind of compensation is, and how do you project that? So that kind of linking rather of any kind of E or S issues to financial impact. I think that's the key skill set. And to be honest, like when I started this, we practically learned on the job. There were no materials. I still remember when I did my CFA, this is from 2014 to 2016 period. I think barring governance, where we had good kind of curriculum coverage, I think there were just 3 pages on ESG in the entire level 1 through and 3 combined, right? From that, today we are basically having a chapter pretty much across each level. So there was very limited kind of content out there to learn from. So we did a lot of on-the-job learning. But for you, anyone new kind of trying to go through it, there's enough content freely and publicly available that I can point you to. And then maybe Sonia, you could also talk about some of the formal certifications that are out there. But I would say you could go to the CFA Institute website, and there's tons of content around how do you do ESG integration across different asset classes, equities, fixed income, so on. There is UNPRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment that I talked about earlier. On their website, you will find a lot of content. So the 101 kind of knowledge and learning you can easily get there. And then if you think you want to level up, then that's where the certifications come in. And maybe I'll pass it on to you, Sonia, to maybe share a little bit about what the Institute has to offer.
Yeah, happy to. I can mention a couple of excellent offerings in sustainability space from the Institute. One is Certificate in ESG Investing, which will soon be called Sustainable Investing Certificate. I think it's an excellent offering for anyone who would like to acquire a solid grounding in various aspects of sustainability. Hardik spoke about the environment, social governance aspects. So it goes into detail about each of these aspects. And I think more than anything else, what it does, it provides you with a common vocabulary to discuss these topics with confidence with your colleagues and other industry professionals. Then if you want to focus on the E aspect, you just want to dip your toes in climate finance. We have an excellent course on climate finance we developed jointly with ACCA. It provides perspectives both from an issuer perspective as well as an investor perspective. And to really dig deeper into climate, given that climate is having its moment, Hardik spoke about the physical manifestations of the changing climate all around us. If you want to acquire skills that he just talked about being able to integrate climate risk and opportunities in investment decision-making, We have the climate risk valuation and investing certificate. And we've successfully experimented with many new initiatives with this offering. It's the first time the Institute is offering a cohort-based learning model, and we are testing for application-based skills through peer-reviewed praxis assignments. Apart from that, our research, advocacy, and standards division comes out with excellent publications. And Catherine will put a link in the chat just now for you to go there and look at it. I can mention a couple of recent publications, a guide on net zero investing, which is a solutions for benchmarks, incentives, and time horizons. And then there is a foundational overview of global markets, which is called an effective tool for net zero. So if you go on that side, if you go on that link that you see in your chat, you are bound to find something of interest to you. Hardik, there are a few questions coming up on greenwashing that I would like you to address. With an increasing regulation in the sustainability finance, how do you see the future and how to identify the greenwashing, which has become very common in practice? And then there was another question about most firms today claim to be sustainable, but there are also a lot of instances of greenwashing. What steps do you take to ensure you don't associate with such firms?
Sure. So, I mean, for the interest of the broader audience, what does greenwashing mean? It's essentially, in simple terms, not walking the talk, right? So you've committed something, you're claiming that you've done so and so, but you're actually not doing that. It's just marketing and PR. Now, it's going to be, let's say, difficult to preempt greenwashing, but in some cases you can. What has clearly happened in the last 2-3 years is there's been a lot of regulations to prevent greenwashing across the globe, especially in the EU, but also broadly across the globe. So today, if a company is publicly saying something, I think I would kind of give them the benefit of doubt unless I have reason to believe they're kind of simply lying or misrepresenting something. Because if it's in the public domain, like if they meet you in a room and say, yeah, we are doing XYZ and we're really great in sustainability, but don't talk about it publicly, then I will have my doubts, to be honest. Because if you're doing it, then why not share it? This is not competitive disadvantage or anything like that. So I think one way to kind of track this is, I'll take an example. And during my days as an ESG ratings analyst, one thing I could clearly see to differentiate or identify companies that are just doing it to tick the box was the year or the year of metric tons unfavorable, right? So let's say your carbon emission trajectory is going down 5%, 10% year, and then one fine year it goes up. They just stop reporting that metric. That's not how it works, right? I think I would give more importance and more value to a company which says, okay, yes, it's not gone in the right direction as we wanted it, and here are the reasons why it happened, and here's what we're going to do to fix it. I'd rather kind of feel more positive about that company than about a company who just doesn't report. So that's like, these are some of the ways you could think about identifying and avoiding greenwashing. It's just that I think there has to be some sort of a penalty if you are found doing the greenwashing. If that there's no significant penalty, then you have an incentive to lie, right? Essentially. But I would say in today's world, especially in the public equity space, I think you could largely believe a majority of the disclosures because the regulatory frameworks have been tightened over the years. So I shouldn't worry too much about greenwashing in today's environment.
Okay. And there are just a few minutes left, so I would like to go to the next polling question before I pick up a couple more audience questions. So this is really a call to action for the participants. So there's a challenge for you. I would like you to set a personal goal to continue your journey in the sustainability space. So what is the one thing you would do after this webinar to make sure that your journey continues in sustainability space? Would you take on one of our certificates, ESG investing or climate certificate, or subscribe to a sustainability podcast, subscribe to a sustainability blog, expand your network via LinkedIn? I think you might be flooded with requests for LinkedIn connections now. Or would you like to join a local community taking actions towards sustainability? I can see people responding, and I'm really keen to see what is the one thing that our participants would like to do after this webinar to continue their journey. So keep your responses coming. Many of you are interested in further education in the form of certificates, which is very heartening to see. Expanding your network via LinkedIn, I would say that's an excellent way, because then you see the content put up by these experts, and which keeps you up to date with what's happening. A lot of you are interested in joining a local community. Let's end the poll and let's see what the results are. Okay, so 42% would take on certificate in ESG investing or the climate certificate. Secondly, people would like to join a local community to take action, which is excellent. LinkedIn networking is very popular too, subscribing to a sustainability podcast as well. So thank you for those responses. And I think we have maybe... Sorry,
Sonia, a quick comment from my side on the LinkedIn piece. So at least for a couple of years, probably longer, that I remember, what I do is when you go to sustainability events or like kind of more informal networking, I try and avoid exchanging business cards. You have this QR code on LinkedIn. I don't know if most people use it, but on the app, on the homepage, if you just click on the search bar, there's a QR code on the right. You can just connect. Because like frankly, 80-90% of the people you meet at these events, you're not going to kind of email them or call them, right? It's just a connection you want, and maybe there's some synergies later. So that could be a good way to also be a little bit more sustainable and use as less business cards as possible.
Brilliant advice. I agree. 2 quick questions before we close. I like both of them very much. What is the role you see of nature and biodiversity in financial markets?
I think the role is important for the environment and the society. The stage we are at today, I think the understanding about nature and biodiversity is fairly nascent. So I think the impact will come, but it will come probably 3 to 5 years in the future. I'm not saying we should not pay attention to it, but even something as straightforward as climate change and say carbon accounting took a while to kind of become mainstream. So I wouldn't pin too much hopes on like next year everybody's working on nature, but it is definitely going to be the next kind of big thing people focus on after climate.
Makes sense. And I like this question very much as well. What have been your key learnings over your investment career, which you wish you knew earlier? I think that's an excellent question.
That's a good one. Yeah, good one to end with as well. I think I'll probably point out a couple of things here, right? So one is like you have to be a little bit, I would say, more realistic. I'm an optimist by nature, and I think most of us in the sustainability field are passionate about this thing, right? I mean, why would I get into this 15 years back? Like nobody was asking me to do it. I just chose to get into this space. So I think being a little bit more realistic as to, because I remember back in 2014 when I moved from India to Singapore, I was like, okay, in a few years, I think the Indian market will warm up to ESG or sustainable investing. And I'm like, oh, yeah, in 3-4 years, I think it should be there, but we are 10 years hence, and I think still we can do better, right? So I think be a little bit more realistic. I'm not saying that don't aim higher, but certain things which are low-hanging fruits, I think you will be able to impact and implement faster. Certain things will just take time. So don't lose hope, right? That's one thing to keep in mind. The other learning is more about implementation, right? So if you think of ESG ratings as something that's very popularly used across the space, if you're an investor and you're kind of trying to identify good and bad companies based on some sort of ESG rating, whether it's a third-party one or your own, I think don't give too much weight to the numbers. Yes, the numbers will tell you directionally where a company is going or some sort of area to focus more on, but when you kind of read the company's disclosures, when you probably meet the management and not just meet the sustainability team, I think actually go and meet the CEO and CFO and see if they talk as passionately about sustainability as the sustainability team does, right? And that is when you'll know the real what's happening in reality. It's not just a company could be really well resourced and basically tick all the boxes and get a great ESG rating in whatever framework you look at, but maybe at the ground level you're not seeing as much impact happening. So this is something, just don't give too much importance to numbers and don't get lost in numbers. I think it's a starting point, but I think when you do your research, I think go on the ground, meet people who are directly indirectly impacted by the companies, and then kind of make your opinion about how good or bad the company's practices are. So these are a couple of things I can share.
Very sensible advice. Thank you, Hardik. That's all the time we have today. A huge thank you to our speaker. Hardik for taking out time to share his insights with us. And thanks to everyone who joined us live today. And I would encourage you to continue your sustainability journey, whichever way, you have your call to action, whatever works for you, but please do something to continue your sustainability journey. And I wish you all the best for your careers and future endeavors. And stay tuned for tomorrow's sessions. Thank you all.